Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Curious Realm's final parts of our coverage of the Roswell UFO Festival right here at the International UFO Museum in Roswell, New Mexico. We're very pleased to be joined by the author of the foreword to the Roswell Ultimate Code Case, Joseph Buchman. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
It's great to be here. I'm having a fantastic day.
Now, your website, The People of Earth Apologize. Tell us a little bit about the concept behind that.
Yeah, so I was involved in corporate and individual training involving mission statements and plans of action, whatever. And as a part of that training, I started asking myself, what do I want to do to make the biggest difference possible on the planet in the limited amount of time I have left?
Sure.
You know, a lot of us imagine we're going to live forever, apparently, based on how we act. But I can sense growing older and leaving a legacy. And so in 2007, I was working with that company and doing those kind of trainings and kind of looking in the mirror at me. And I believe the evidence that some advanced life has been engaged with humanity is credible. I don't talk about believing or disbelieving in UFOs.
Yeah, absolutely.
That puts it all in the world of religion. But let's look at the most compelling evidence. And among that includes Dr. Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon.
Absolutely.
You can find a YouTube video of him saying he'd been privileged enough to have been briefed on the fact that we've attempted to reverse engineer non-human created technology. Sixth man to walk on the moon, PhD from MIT.
Yep.
And yet that just kind of goes into a cotton ball of apathy in terms of how it impacted the media or the population of Earth at large.
Yep.
So I can imagine, as Stan Friedman used to say, a benign to benevolent alien writing a junior high school report on planet Earth, right? Primary activity, killing each other. You know, primary economic activity, developing ever more horrible ways of killing each other. Right now, there's 10,000 nuclear missiles pointed at you, at me, at us. They're all pointed down. None of them go away. Well, that's insanity. It's literally called mutually assured destruction.
Yeah.
Mad.
And we're okay with that.
We appear to be, or we've gone numb to it, or calloused to it, or cynical about it. But an alien dropping by to visit, I mean, imagine you're in a spaceship, you go to a planet full of lizards, and they got 10,000 nukes pointed down at the planet.
Yeah.
Not a place I want to drop by for tea. And then I've also presented to NASA's SETI conference. Every 2 years they used to hold a Contact Cultures of the Imagination conference.
Yeah.
And I had visited there even earlier as a tourist. But you know, they've got the satellite dishes and they're listening for radio broadcasts that have traveled at liminal speeds across long distances, and maybe we'd find evidence of technological cultures out there. And I had this moment where I realized if they're here, they've got artificial intelligence. I mean, we've got the beginnings of artificial intelligence. They've got whatever we have times 1,000.
Sure.
That artificial intelligence would be downloading and analyzing everything on our internet, all of our broadcasts, all of our cell phone calls, instantaneously, right? And I don't need a telescope to talk to aliens. I just need a website if that's happening. Where would I then begin a conversation? So with a benign to benevolent alien or angel or ancestors or even God, where would you start a conversation as an earthling, you know? And it reminds me of when our kids pulled all the pots and pans out of every kitchen cabinet, you know, and I go in and I see this horrible mess. What I want to hear as a dad is, we had a lot of fun. We weren't really thinking about this. We're really sorry. There's no way we can put it back together by ourselves.
Yeah.
Could you give me a hand?
Yeah.
So I put up www.thepeopleofearthapologize.com in 2007. And I started soliciting apologies from people who felt like this was a good idea.
Sure.
And publishing them there. And that was right before my first campaign for the United States House, where I ran for a seat as a representative in the House in 2008. With Rob Bishop and Morgan Bowen being the Republican and Democrat.
Oh, wow.
And I brought that into the campaign.
Yeah.
Like, this is an important political issue. In 2008, I was ridiculed horribly, right?
Yeah.
I ran again in 2017. Jason Chaffetz resigned right after getting elected. And between 2008 and 2017, there had been a tipping point and how the media and a lot of voters and the audiences looked at advocating for an investigation, deeper investigation into evidence of humanity's engagement with non-human created intelligence or technology. So the website's out there. I let it go dormant for a while. I just brought it back a couple of years ago. I'm looking for a 12-year-old who can do the graphic design, somebody who knows WordPress. I wrote it in Dreamweaver way back when.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
wow.
I thought
Classic.
I knew HTML. I need help.
Well, this is a topic of code. We have Keith Sealand right over here, the author of the Humaniverse, on the show at least a few times a year. And that is a conversation that we have with him regularly. I'm an audio video engineer in the world of corporate AV. So the conferences you went to, I was the one in the black in the back.
Yeah, right.
But one of the things that I bring up in reference to that all the time is the first thing they're going to find on the way, they're going to hear our communications long before they ever get here.
Right.
And imagine the way your mind works. If you read a story and you have zero frame of reference other than that one thing, if you hear a radio, a prime example is War of the Worlds. With zero frame of reference, what happened when people heard War of the Worlds? People went to madness. People literally looted towns, stuff like that. Madness occurred. So the idea that that's the first thing that's going to happen is they have zero frame of reference as to why Hitler took over. They just hear the horrible things about Hitler, So yeah, it's an interesting concept of A, are we ready to have that conversation as a global human race?
Yeah.
And B, are we ready for their reaction when they arrive here? Will they even arrive here, or will they lock the door on the way by?
I don't know, but we're certainly ready to begin sending a message out.
Exactly.
Whether the conversation
We
is
already
ready
are.
to begin. Yeah, we already. That was the premise of Carl Sagan's Contact and the movie, that the first high-powered transmissions were the Olympic Games in Germany in 1937. And then they send it back to us, which freaks out Jodie Foster. But I think that I find the evidence credible that they are here.
Absolutely.
That some form of non-human intelligence is here. It seems to be poking us every now and then, but mostly observing and watching. And I can imagine if I were in their position looking at the Earth, that perhaps it looks something like a caterpillar in a chrysalis state. And if you try to help a caterpillar come out of its cocoon, and it's struggling and struggling, it looks like it's going to die before it can even get out of there. But if you try to help, you'll kill the butterfly because it won't develop the strength in its wings to be able to fly, and then it will die. And I have a sense that that's how aliens, at least the benign to benevolent ones, are looking at us. Like humanity needs to work this out on its own, and we're going to stand by, and we're curious, and we're probably infinitely patient. And then whether they would stop a global thermonuclear war or not, I don't know. I certainly wouldn't count on it. I think we need to fix it ourselves.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Amen to that. Because quite literally, you're looking at the best place to look is Gene Roddenberry, the first rule of the Galactic Federation. You do not interfere.
Right.
You do not interfere with what's going on a planet. Observe, watch, see what's going on, learn lessons from it, maybe even, get technology or ideas of it, but you don't interfere with that race of people because you may utterly disturb that whole ecosystem on your way out.
Yeah. It's the butterfly effect. You make some small change and a butterfly flaps its wings in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, and there's a thunderstorm in San Francisco a week later. You can't, maybe they know or have a better idea of the future consequences of small acts.
Sure.
Maybe they can even time travel and undo things that they've done. I don't know.
Well, yeah.
I moderated the abduction panel last night with Travis Walton and Kathleen Martin and Tom Reed and Jennifer Stein. And I said to Travis, something occurred to me, which was, they brought him back 5 days later. It created a huge kerfuffle. His colleagues were accused of murder. There were lie detector tests. It split the town of Snowflake, Arizona in half because part of the community believed them, part didn't, part believed Travis today, part still don't. Well, if they were really intending not to upset us with the butterfly effect, because that was a pretty big butterfly effect with Travis, and they had access to time travel, they would have brought him back, in the moment that happened. They could have taking him away, spin away where time is there. So apparently they didn't have access to that, or they didn't intend to use it, or maybe it's not that precise. I don't know. But they brought him back 5 days later.
Yes.
Was that intentional? And if they had had access to time dilation, would they have returned him?
Sure.
I don't know. It's a mystery with Travis's case. And he's sitting right there, by the way, as I'm talking. It's just fantastic. You got to come to Roswell.
It's a great show.
It's about the people.
It is.
Who you meet here and you get a chance to talk to. I told everybody there were about 140 or so people last night. Look, you've got 2 hours with some of the most credible experiencers of contact with non-humans.
That's right.
Ever. Tonight could change your life.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, I said, go home, pull up Fire in the Sky, pull up Jennifer's Travis documentary, pull up The Interrupted Journey, where Barney Hill is played by James Earl Jones, of all people.
Yeah.
Don't sleep and come back tomorrow.
That was the credibility of it.
Yeah.
When you look at that,
The fact that, and this is something that I brought up recently on the show, because not a lot of people realize how many made-for-TV movies like that there were back in the day. There was one about Tea and Doe. There was a made-for-TV movie about the heads of Heaven's Gate.
Wow. I did not know.
Called The Other Two, I believe it was called. But literally, like, it's their entire story. So these things were looked at differently by the media at one point. There was definitely we talked with Donald Schmidt right next to you about a lot of the suppression that happened with Roswell, and there's tons of suppression. But there were also some really interesting things like that came out that had major release on national television and big impact whenever it happened. And then years later, we find out something else. Much like Travis's case, whenever we talk to him, and even Tom Reed's case right here behind you. A lot of what the public knows and is familiar with from that story are utterly Hollywoodized concepts. And they aren't exactly what the experiencer themselves experienced. So even that kerfuffle of how do we get the real story? How do we get the real story out to people about what happened so that we can correct that narrative before it goes way down rabbit holes? If you don't start digging in an angle, eventually you're at the bottom of a hole.
The I find amusing as my friends who say, well, come on, Joe. The government can't keep any secrets. They couldn't even keep Monica Lewinsky's.
They did a great job with Trinity.
They did. But they say, they couldn't even keep Monica Lewinsky's dress secret. Well, in a post-disclosure world, those same people are going to turn around and say, well, see, there's all Don Schmidt's books and Stan Friedman's books, and they didn't keep it secret. But in this moment, before that occurs, we're saying, well, it can't possibly be true.
Yeah.
But they've done an effective job, I think, of intentional disinformation that has been piled on top of this silver thread of truth. And that truth is, Ed Mitchell was briefed on that. Jesse Marcel Sr. was not an idiot. This was the only atomic bomb-capable military force on the planet at the time. Was based in Roswell. Why would the aliens go to New Mexico? Well, this was where the Enola Gay was, the plane that dropped the bombs on Japan. They were all here, and those people misidentified a weather balloon as an alien craft. Give me a break. Well, on top of that sliver of real truth, they've dumped a ton of disinformation, and then that disinformation has attracted a circus of fraudsters who are taking money from the gullible and taking people out in the desert for $7,000 to have 4 days of staring at the stars.
Yeah.
I think you know who I'm talking about. And other hucksters who are out there, selling their movies and engaged in fraud with their contracts with their producers and getting sued. You know who I'm talking about. And then there's also the people who are maybe in need of some psychiatric intervention that are also attracted to the UFO field. So you got the sideshow circus of the fraudsters and hucksters and the gullible and people who are maybe a little off center. But under there somewhere are the serious scientists, the academics, and the credible witnesses who are not lying. I don't believe Travis Walton has made up a thing in his entire life.
There's zero vested interest to impact your entire life and the lives of your friends who you've known and worked with for years and that kind of way. There's zero vested interest that's just it. It's not like It's not like he's sitting in a 120,000 square foot mansion from the
Right.
money he's made from movies or stories or books or anything like that. That's not who Travis is and not what he's about.
And if you ask him, as I did last night, if you could do it over, would you stay in the truck? Would you put your hand on that handle? Would you leave the door shut? The answer was, hell yeah, I would not get out. It's created an awful lot of chaos and an awful lot of pain.
Yeah.
So why would someone do that? I think Michiko Kiko, the physicist.
absolutely.
How's his name pronounced?
Michio Kaku.
Michio Kaku, thank you very much. You know, he is now saying, as a serious scientist, the burden of proof is on those who say
It isn't.
It isn't happening.
That's it.
Right?
Exactly.
The bulk of the evidence shows some non-human intelligence and technology is engaging us.
Yeah.
The burden of proof is now on those who would deny that.
Well, and that's a point that I bring up on my show all the time is let's keep capital E evidence right where it belongs, which is that's what you should give your lawyer to get you out of prison.
Yeah.
That's everything else is data. So let's look at it as data the same way science would. Let's don't call it evidence until it is, because that's proper. But there is also a realm of things that happen. Once again, the 2 to 3 percentile of cases that are out there that are fully credible in that kind of way. And when you look at it in that scientific point of view of, well, there's only a 3 to 5% anomaly that is unexplainable when it comes to UFO. There's only a 3 to 5% of abduction cases that have this kind of credibility, like these 3 people directly behind us, you know?
Right.
But does that make it false? No. And just like any good DA, if somebody comes in and has their Me Too moment, you believe the experiencer until proven otherwise.
Yeah. I think that's what we should do.
And that's where we should be with this. We should be believing every experiencer until proven otherwise, because at that point it's on the burden of proof of the doubter,
Yeah.
just
Well,
like you're saying.
A couple of years ago at Contact in the Desert, I got asked a question, who speaks for humanity? Right, if we're going to have first contact, who speaks for humanity?
The UN intergalactic representative from Korea.
Okay,
There is actually an interplanetary representative at the UN now.
I think that's great.
As of 2012.
But if you talk to these experiencers,
Yeah.
right, they're not communicating with this non-human intelligence by mouths moving and vibrating air, right?
Yeah.
They're able to read our thoughts. They're able to communicate non-verbally. And what I said at Contact in the Desert is, we're all speaking for humanity right now.
That's right.
Maybe what we need to do, if you're interested in first contact or open contact, is change the kind of stuff we're posting on the internet. Because if it's out there on the internet, they're grokking it, to use a Heinlein term.
Absolutely.
Downloading it all. They're getting every radio broadcast, every cell phone
Yeah.
call. But beyond that, if you believe the experiencers, they're also getting our thoughts.
Yep.
So the answer to who speaks for humanity is, we're not going to send some guy from the UN out there who's going to say, oh yeah, don't believe the vast body of communication you're getting from human brains. That's not what's really happening. I'm here to speak for humanity. No, they're going to know what we're thinking, what our fears are, what our hopes are, what our intentions are. We need to quiet down the violent intentions, amp up the loving thoughts toward each other, change the nature of what's out in our media, and then see what happens.
Yeah.
I know if I were the alien, I'd be waiting for that.
Absolutely.
If I had the ability to monitor all their broadcasts on some planet, much less read their minds, I'm going to wait to drop by when I know it's safe to have a cup of tea.
That's
and
right.
I ain't going anywhere with 10,000 nukes pointed down.
Yeah.
So,
Precisely.
why don't they disclose? Well, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? At the same time, they do seem to be poking us or contacting a few of us or engaging with families over generations.
Yeah.
Maybe even experimenting with our DNA. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, and we speak a lot about vibration on there. I'm an audio engineer. I make binaural beat music, things like that. And one of the things I say on shows regularly is frequency is not just a sound, tone, or color. It is your thought form. Your thought form is your frequency as well. How frequently are you thinking something? So yeah, if they're tied into those frequencies, our collective thought form as humanity is what they're picking up. So if we have that collective thought form of fear, even like what the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance is all about. You know, the idea of changing the dialogue. When when you look even around us at the representation in film, you look at the first movie ever, Gordon, my favorite, right here next to us. That was fear. That was utter fear. They are coming. They're invading. We need to get our military ready. Everything. There are very few movies that show an open E.T., but even that had fear, and they were after E.T. You know, so most of the
Spielberg
movies
went back and re-edited it to take the guns out and replace them with walkie-talkies.
CBs, yeah, I remember that.
Oh man,
That killed me inside.
yeah.
But that's just it. You know, when you're talking about an overall dialogue of this phenomenon, it's entrenched in fear. It's entrenched in it. And we really do have to change that mentality about the topic from the jump.
Yeah. Roddenberry was an exception to that with an awful lot of Star Trek.
Absolutely.
But you're right, fear and violence is what sells.
Yeah.
It's what amps up your emotions.
It's what's sexy.
It's what's sexy. Anyhow, I'm thinking about a tangent.
That's
If
okay,
you want,
tangent.
Google the excitation transfer theory.
Okay.
So this was, my PhD advisor was a guy named Dolph Zillman who pioneered that field. And one of the things we were looking at was why horror movies tend to have couples showing up, right? It wasn't, you'd think a horror movie was something a single guy would go to, or whatever.
Yeah.
But it was always a guy and a girl and a guy and a girl. And what he found was that emotion has two characteristics. One is its direction, right? It's valence. So the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference, right? The opposite of joy is fear and so forth. So you got this range of emotions that could be represented in a circle. And then you have the emotional intensity. So you go to the horror movie and you get fear and you peg out on emotional intensity and the movie's over. And now the intensity stays, the excitation transfers to the subsequent emotion, which is then you go out and make out in the car. So those horror movies were attracting couples because it seemed to have a benefit later in the transfer of the intensity of emotion.
It gets the hormones moving in the brain, and
it does.
That's what you're left with.
It's hard to get that sense of love in a motion picture. Fear is easy. Horror is easy. Well, changing that culture would be something that might move us toward that kind of contact experience as well.
Yeah. Well, and we really need to focus on that because once again, it's our frequency of thought, and that frequency of thought literally guides the conversation as well. And if we aren't open to the experience of an experiencer, then we've got a very, very narrow keyhole through which we're looking at a phenomenon. Because if you even in science, the first step is observation. The second step is question.
Yeah. And replication's nice too.
And that's where I say it all the time on the show, every single experiencer is a scientist. You've already started the scientific method. Like you've got the first two steps going. Beyond that, it's collecting data, testing, things like that. So you've already started the citizen science just by having your sighting, by having your experience. Are you following it through with that kind of same fervor? Right. Are you willing to follow it through in that kind of way and inspect more and follow your experience more, dig deeper into that? What does it mean to you? How does it change you? The one thing I've found amongst every experiencer is the change that has happened long-term in their life. The way that they view the world in a totally different way than they ever viewed it.
Yeah, the other thing we can do is put people on orbit or send them out to flip around the moon and come back, and you get what's described as the overview effect. So Ed Mitchell experienced that. Apparently most, if not all, of the Apollo astronauts, there were 24 human beings who went out to the moon and came back. Not all of them landed, 12 landed and walked, but 24 went out and back. 3 went twice, so 27 seats out and back. Among those who did that, they looked at the pale blue dot of the Earth, and suddenly you think, what are we fighting over imagined lines in the sand?
It's all
useless. One little marble. I think one can reach the sense of an overview effect individually by just contemplating the reality of who we are, where we live, what's the purpose of life, and surely it's not to fight over inches of territory and engage in the kind of activity.
Or your favorite football team.
That's nuts as well.
Distractions.
The bigger issue is the death in Ukraine and Russia and in the Middle East and elsewhere,
Feeding
the
hungry.
enslavement of human beings, the starvation of children, those things probably need to end as well. But yeah, even the nationalism of USA at the Olympics, I'm like, no. No, I'm all about cheering on individual accomplishment.
That's right.
Or even some
Even team
sports.
accomplishment.
But why associate it with a flag or a nation and we're good, they're bad, we're
When
better,
the
you're
fervor
worse?
comes about, that's one of the things we bring up regularly, especially when it comes to paranormal things like that, is the want of confirmation married with confirmation bias.
Yeah.
And that's a dangerous place to
It is a
be.
dangerous
It's a
place.
dangerous place to exist as a person.
In terms of self-identification, you'll find an article written in 2008 during my first campaign for Congress. And I'm like, I think the organizing political unit is a galaxy. So forget all this, go USA, go France, whatever, soccer. Go Milky Wayans.
That's right.
Let's organize there and then see how that works out.
And the idea of exopolitics.
Yeah.
The idea of we need to be ready to have that conversation on a larger level. It's time, and we need to be ready for it.
Jesse Marcel Jr., who is a child of Roswell, said after the citizens' hearing in 2013, and I'll paraphrase it, but he said as he imagines life throughout the cosmos, that we're all connected, because at some point in time, there was quantum entanglement and a singularity.
That's right.
And in that moment, we were all one. And why don't we recognize that common connection between us and all life out there? I mean, my goodness, we can't even get along on Earth with human beings that have a slightly different skin color.
Yep.
What is our hope for dealing with a praying mantis being?
Yeah, precisely. And, I will take that one step further into the fact that we are all still connected because we're 90% empty space contained by a quantum field.
There you
So
go.
I am sharing an electron field with my wife in Florida right now.
Yeah.
By all ninth grade science that I was taught and made an A in. So, we are fully connected right now.
Once you reach that sort of internal awareness, do you really need some politician to disclose anything? It's like, it's about time. So I'd encourage all of your listeners and anyone else who comes across this podcast to engage in that kind of work. If you're a logical positive, start looking at the harder evidence from eyewitnesses like a guy with a PhD who walked on the moon.
Yeah.
Look at Ed Mitchell. Look at the statements now that have been given to the United States House under oath with pretty severe penalties for lying to Congress, for perjuring yourself. Start there. Or if you're someone who's already in a meditative state or whatever, just start putting it out there that you'd like to hear from them, whoever they are. And apparently, if you believe some of the latest testimony, there's this psionics that's occurring where actual craft can appear when people call them forth.
Yeah.
And apparently our military, some agencies within it are doing that as well. There you go.
And that's just it. Looking at all these different modalities, looking at all these different ways to not just contact them, but to contact each other and make that connection. My father is one of those. I'm 50. He's about 75. His statement about the hearings. What about all these little green men? What are these guys talking? Who cares about all that? I'm like, okay. But do you care about billions of dollars over the last 70 years being shifted without your knowledge?
Yeah, and without congressional oversight.
Without congressional oversight, because
some would
eventually,
call that treason.
And we will not. I don't think we aren't going to have the Houdini moment of somebody wheeling out a gurney in the middle of Congress with a sheet over it and pulling it off, and there's the wreckage with a finger. But what we're going to see, I think, because of good people like Grush, who've said it was my job to follow the money to the door, and when I got there, they slammed it in my face. We will probably end up within the next 5 years or so with an Ollie North character with his hand up saying, I worked for this alphabet agency. I wrote the checks, and this is where it went.
Yeah, and I'd like to believe Grush has done that in the skiff.
Yes. Same.
I think there's some hints of that coming out from Burchett and Luna and
It
others.
seems that way.
So we'll see. It's an exciting time to be alive, and the
It
most
is.
exciting place to be is here in Roswell.
Amen to that. Before we let you go, one last time, let everybody know where they can go to find your research, where they
Right.
can go to to submit.
Go look at my website and then, please send me your Vita and I'll hire you to make it a prettier thing graphically. www.thepeopleofearthapologize.com. I'm trying to put something out on the internet that makes up for all the porn and cat videos that the ETs
And
might
the cat
go.
porn videos.
Yeah, well, those are. I haven't seen that. Oh my goodness, please no.
You aren't deep enough on Reddit.
No, I'm not. But I'd like to believe seriously that this website will go down in history as something that might have been a tipping point toward. Okay, there's the kind of thing we're waiting for humanity to start having that perspective and point of view.
And it really, truly is time. Joseph, thank you so
pleasure.
much for your time. I'd love to have you on again and again to talk about this
anytime.
because truly it is one of those, it's a conversation that needs to be had. And as I normally tagline the show out with, it's your open hearts, your open minds that make the conversation, and without the conversation, humanity does not march forward. That is literally the tagline of this show. So
Ditto.
It's what we are about. I would love to have you on again and again.
Anytime.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, you are online, everybody, checking out everything from the People of Earth Apologize.com. Make sure to stop on by CuriousRealm.com. That is where you can like, follow, subscribe. It's where you can catch all of our interviews every Tuesday live at 8 p.m. That's where you can find all of the books, movies, and classes from our guests. Stay tuned through this commercial break. We'll be right back with our final bit of coverage from the International UFO Museum right here in Roswell, New Mexico with the Roswell UFO Festival. Right after this, folks.
The key to good science is good research. At the heart of good research is a good data set. With the field observation and encounter log from Curious Research, you can easily keep track of your investigative information all in one place, making it easier to review cases and readily see comparisons and contrasts between them. Whether out in the woods squatching, in a back room gathering EVPs, or using high-tech gear to track UFO, UAP activity, this easy-to-carry, pocket-sized scientific data log is the perfect companion for any field researcher. You can find your copy of the Curious Research Field Observation and Encounter Log at Amazon.com or visit the official Curious Realm store at CuriousRealm.com/store to reserve your copy for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is CuriousRealm.com/store.